Okay, well, welcome to you all here today with the Association of Change Management Professionals here in Australia. And I'd like to welcome our panelists for today. We have Valerie Law, we have Max Theseira, and we have Enrique Ugarte. And our producer today, our moderator, our man with the questions is Radan. Kocourek. Thank you for joining us, Radan, as well. And we're going to be talking today about a topic that we started talking about as a group of interested characters at the business show recently at the beginning of November here in Sydney, when we ran a discussion panel. And this particular discussion panel was titled An Innovative Approach to Organisation or Organisational Design. And we're going to kick off with a few thoughts from yours truly, Brad Rilatt, here in Sydney. And then we're going to move around our panelists and give them a sort of 10-minute window to have a presentation of their thoughts and ideas, and then we'll come together as a group, a discussion panel, and explore them a little further. And our friend Radan has got a few questions he wants to ask of us to provoke that conversation. So let's get underway. So an innovative approach to organisational design is a really interesting sort of topic. And I find in the work that I've done over the last 30-odd years that a lot of the organisational designs are anything but innovative. And I say that with great respect. They're fairly normal. Can you just use that expression? And not particularly innovative. So I want to put to you the idea of just a couple of ideas to start our thinking on this topic today. And here I'd like to introduce you to Formula One racing, and in particular, how the world record was set in 2023 when the McLaren team achieved something that had never been achieved before. They delivered a result that set a world record, a result for the fastest pit stop in Formula One history. I'm going to play this little video to give you a sense of that and then sort of unpack it just a little bit. Here we go. And there we go. So 1.8 seconds, the new world record set a couple of years ago by the McLaren team. So just for a moment, ponder the thought. Did that look organised? Was the team organised? Was it chaotic? I've asked this question of many people in recent times as I've shared this little video with them about team collaboration, about team accountability, learning, frequency of practice, all sorts of these issues when it comes to organisational design. And many people say it looks rather chaotic, but look at the slide that we have in front of you right now. Everyone had a very, very clear role, and they executed that role with incredible precision in the space of a couple of seconds. 1.8 seconds is world's best. Not 2, not 2.3, which is sort of competitive and good and okay and excellent, but world's best, 1.8 seconds. So what might it take if you were to think about the team you're working with, the organisation you're engaged with, the change that's taking place in your enterprise? What would a 1.8 second kind of performance look like? How might this kind of metaphor for organisational design, and particularly the designs that execute change particularly well and effectively, what could that look like? As you can see, a remarkable combination of talent, precision, and deliberate practice. So here's this notion that collaboration and all that goes with it, the learning, the feedback, the accountability, the impact is a competitive advantage. And some might argue that case, but let's look at it sort of fundamentally. Frequent practice and enduring adaptation. And the word adaptation is the one I wanted to focus on just for a minute. It is the key to this success, to this kind of world-beating performance. As it says here quite clearly, teams rehearse these pit stops hundreds of times to achieve sub-2 second precisions. They pay attention to what they are doing during rehearsal, and very importantly, they pay attention to their impact on their team colleagues. So does your team pay attention to the impact each person has on one another? Never mind just the pursuit of the result or the outcome that we might be trying to achieve. They review what they did to learn how to improve. They look at the feedback to describe the impact and whether or not it was advancing their mutual interests towards an outcome or holding them back from that outcome. I know my friend Enrique here has a lot to say about outcomes, and rightly so. So we'll be talking about that in a few moments as well, I'm sure. They practice again with intentionality. It's very deliberate practice. They apply learning to secure and embed better ways of being as a cohort of practitioners. Wow, amazing stuff. So I want to challenge people who might be watching this video to think about your team or collective performance. How are you relating to one another so that that level of trust, that level of precision, that level of performance, if you want to call it that, is realized consistently? Okay, now to go to my second point is to look at the work of a colleague of mine whom I respect enormously. I worked with Jim for many, many years. Jim Farrell has just recently this year published his new book called You and We. And in that book, I believe he has described for us a new way of designing organizations, teams, functions, groups, cross-functional projects and programs that deliver change and perhaps transformation. I've got to be honest, I have a few doubts about the level of actual transformation that we achieve in most of our enterprises. That being said, it's a challenge rather than an absolute. Here are his 4 laws of relation that are to be found in this wonderful story. It's a story, this book, and it's the interplay of the characters that is the foundation for our learning and ultimately our application. You can see on screen the 4 laws of relation that Jim has postulated, and quite frankly, through many years of study and practice, I find them incredibly rigorous and deeply profound. He also offers us 5 levels of relationship. 5 levels of relationship. And again, through my own experience over the last few decades, I would say that most of us in most organizations are doing well if we can achieve that sort of addition level, that sort of third level where we add to one another, but we still fundamentally are working as individuals. Have a think about that. Are you truly collaborating? Are your efforts and the efforts of others being multiplied? Okay, it's quite a rigorous kind of concept and question on that 4th level. And I have rarely found in my walk around the planet and in many organizations, I've rarely found that top level where we're actually deeply integrated as a whole system of human effort, where we are literally compounding the efforts of one and another. Very, very challenging sorts of thoughts and ideas, the 5 levels of relation. And I encourage you for your Christmas reading to have a good look at Jim's book. It's a deep insight into how I believe organizations will be designed in the future, certainly the ones that will excel and continuously be capable of adapting to this ever-changing world. Just to reassure you as we bring my thoughts to a close here, it's just these couple of thoughts, is to look at this notion of how you might measure this relational field. And I know, Val, you've got some thoughts around this relational field as well, which we'll share shortly. But this is the diagram of a team map looking at the relational field using that previous scale, if you like, those 5 levels of relation and our impact upon one another. This is a wonderful measurement tool, which again is described in Jim's new book. So there's a couple of thoughts around thinking of your change effort, your organization, its design. Is it intentional or not? Many organizations I work with are not intentionally designed, just as your house might be, or the car that's being built for you, or something else that is of physical nature. Often organizations are not particularly designed well, or dare I say intentionally fit for purpose. So with those thoughts, I'm going to hand over to my next colleague, Enrique Ugarte from Headway Group. Enrique, I'd like you to take the stage, my friend, and share your thoughts for the day around an innovative approach for organizational design. Thanks, Enrique.
Thank you. I don't know about an innovative approach, but maybe an innovative approach to teaching you how to do organizational design. So what I want to speak to everybody about today is organizational design is it's often talked about as being a concept, right? We need to have organizational design. Organizational design needs to look like this. It doesn't need to look like this. But rarely have I seen that someone provides a really practical way of how to do organizational design. So if you're a change manager, or indeed if you're an organizational designer, and organizational design is a fundamental discipline of change management, you need a framework. You need to know how to do that and go about doing it. So what I want to provide for those of you who are unfamiliar is a framework on how to do organizational design and an overview of what it is. So on the next slide. All right, see this unstable house in the background with beams propping up the walls and makeshift fixes. Someone asks, why does it take so long to add a window? Not realizing the whole structure is shaky. Without a solid foundation, any extra window will just collapse along with the rest of the house. That's what happens when we focus on isolated fixes instead of designing the full end state. If the operating model can't hold together, the solution won't last. So what's end state design? End state design ensures a clear and integrated picture of how the organization will operate once the change has been implemented. It takes the solution design and projects it forward into the finished form so stakeholders can see exactly how capabilities, structures, and ways of working will fit together. Organizational design avoids 4 common reasons for project failure. Number 1, these are reasons for project failure. Designing only the process changes while ignoring the enablers that sustain the process changes. Number 2, assuming the to-be model will naturally hold together without deliberate integration and agreement. Number 3, overlooking interdependencies, so creating a fragile or incoherent operating model, so it's something that's not holistic. And number 4, treating the future state as abstract rather than a concrete and testable design. So I want to share with you how to build an operating model, how to think it through so that you can create a sustainable future state for your organization next time you're doing change. We'll be doing that using the diamond model, which comprises of 4 elements: processes in the middle, and around the outside, management and performance systems, information and technology systems, roles and accountabilities, capabilities, and behaviors. We'll come back to that. But in the first instance, what I want to talk to you about is, you're going to do organizational design. What we need to learn about is applying third-degree thinking. All right, so what's third-degree thinking? Probably I'll give you a couple of examples so you understand what I mean by that. First example, imagine you're playing a game of chess. It's now time to take your turn. Think about third-degree thinking like this. First-degree thinking is your move. Where do I want to put my piece? But before you move your piece, you also have to think second-degree thinking, which is, what would be the opponent's response? What would be their defense, and what are their counter options? Then third-degree thinking is, let's reconsider. What would be my counter move to that, and how would I plan subsequent defense or counterattack options based on that? All right, let's have another example. If I go to the next slide. Imagine that you're running a restaurant and you want to put a new item on the menu. First-degree thinking is really simple. Let's just come up with a new dish, write up the new menu, and put it out there. Second-degree thinking requires the enablers. You have to now think about the ingredients, the suppliers. What are the prep actions? What are the cooking instructions, allergen labels, point of sale buttons on your technology? And then there's third-degree thinking, supply chain and ergonomics. Do you have to redesign stations, kitchen, workflow, new vendor onboarding, and chef training? This kind of thinking is required when you're implementing a new operating model in an organization. All right, next slide. Introducing the diamond model. The diamond model operates in exactly the same way. Third-degree thinking. Here's how it works. Start from the beginning. Go to the center. What is the new changed process or procedure that you want to initiate? Second-degree thinking. Go around the outside of this model, from management performance systems, roles and accountabilities, capabilities and behaviors, information and technology systems. What is the as-is and to-be models that need to be in place to sustain that new process or procedure? Third-degree thinking is called recursion check. Sometimes when you're putting in a new management or performance system or a new capability and behavior or a new culture, that might be a significant enough change to take that and place it in the middle again and create another round of thinking around that particular change because it's significant enough to do so. This is step one, step two, step three, or first, second, and third degree thinking around organizational design to create a robust model that's sustainable long after the project has finished. Thank you.
Fantastic, Enrique. That was really helpful. Thanks, mate. Appreciate that indeed.
Right.
Let's move on to Valerie, tell us your thoughts about innovations that you are thinking about in org design.
So for myself, I would say that listening already to things around structures in my mind, yes, we've normally got picture charts, boxes and lines and so on. But the world is shifting, and it's shifting fast. And it's no longer just about those roles, those systems, those processes, line sorting and hierarchies that we'll think about. That's not going to hold change anymore. And actually, it's already beginning to change as we speak. Because for me, the real architecture of an organization, and it's whether it's 10 people or whether it's 10,000, it lives in something that you can't see on paper. It's the quality of its relationships. And Brad, when you actually showed that Grand Prix video, absolutely, that relationship had to be there. So now those relationships, though, not including only people, as we saw in your video, but also intelligence systems. Now, when we look at relationships with or without intelligent systems, we need to bear in mind that a study recently done by MIT found that those teams that performed with AI, actually the AI outperformed the humans. Now, that might sound confronting, but the reason wasn't human weakness. What it was a relational breakdown of that trust, the communication. There was no shared language. And yet it's the same whether it's human teams, whether it's magnified across people or technology. So it tells us one thing, that it's not about the tools that are going to be the only thing we look at as we look at an innovative approach to organizational design, but it's how we design the relationship. Now, for me, in terms of now looking at what would be a difference, is that I look at organizations, and again, whether it's small, medium, or large, and we also have a phrase that we put out there that is about making sure that we help people achieve better business results through better business relationships. And again, it doesn't matter the size of the organization. So what we look in terms of now or in the future is guiding leaders to design trust, inclusion, and also decision-making, the agility of which you also spoke about, Brad, as well as you did, Enrique. But it's making all of that and the collaboration intentional. Now, small and medium businesses, it means scaling without losing that human glue. For large organizations, as I see it, though, it means restoring the trust and the agility that has already been mentioned, but doing it at scale. Because performance isn't going to be just about the technology, it's going to be about the relationship. And it's quite interesting that in the Nature Human Behavior meta-analysis, it found that human AI performance improves only when trust and coordination are designed in. Also, KPMG's 2025 report calls for AI literacy, trust, and relational ethics essential for adoption and value. And there are other organizational studies, but they're all looking towards relational health, making it a stronger predictor of organizational predictability and adaptability. And it's bigger than strategy alone. Now, this isn't soft, it's systematic. And to give you an example of quite recently, Netflix, for example, they have something called the informed captain decision-making process. They go through a system of making your decisions, but it's no longer structural, as in terms to the top down and then down to the next layers. It's not just down and across. No, they bring people in that are essential to every specific decision that they need to make. And that means that they have a process to make sure that is done. But human intelligence and AI intelligence is involved together in that decision-making process. AI is bringing up the decisions, but what is happening with the trust is that the humans are making sure that the decisions are trustworthy. So as I look out in terms of the vision, I'd say, well, let's imagine a small to medium-sized business. They're able to adopt the AI, whether it's for customer service, and many restaurants that you'll find now, they've already got an AI receptionist. Now, it's not being done just for cost cutting. It's being done as a way to give more time for those teams to converse, to discuss, resolve the issues, have those decision-making processes in place. And why? So that they can improve. They can improve their organization, improve their structure, improve the design of operating together. Now, as we build that high-performance team that you spoke about, Brad, then it's more not any longer about building just that team as I see it, but building loyalty and, again, the trustworthy for humans and AI to work together well. Now, it could be that it's a large organization. And right now we are seeing that there's a lack of empathy and inclusion, and it doesn't matter if that's human or AI integration. And yes, we're talking a lot about agentic teams, and there'll be people listening to this saying, well, what is an agentic team? So that means that we are working together as a team, humans and AI, together, where humans and I are not competing, but they are collaborating. And that's the shift that we're already seeing. So in terms of thinking about organizational design, as I see it, it's from hierarchy to relationship. It's from control to co-creation. But it's also from silos to creating that systems of trust. So as I close, all the visuals are there for you to see. We're not just designing organizations anymore. We're designing the relationships that make them work. Yes, human to human, but also, as I've said again, and will say again, from human to intelligent system. Because technology cannot process data, but only relationships create that value. And within that, every conversation, every decision, and every connection matters. So as I see it, that is the future of innovative organizational design. And it's where responsible relational design begins. So thank you, Brad, and thank you,
Thanks, Val.
everybody.
That's powerful. Thank you very much indeed. Well done, and some great thoughts there. And thank you again to you and Enrique already for the wonderful graphics to support your thoughts and your ideas for today. I want to hand over now to our third panelist, Max Theseira from CMG-Change. And Max, you've got a few thoughts that sort of carry on a little bit from Val's around GenAI.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic introduction, Val, in terms of the importance of relationships and the human AI interface and the human to human interface and relationships and how they're really important. When I'm thinking about, I guess org design in the era of AI, where might it go? The sort of things that I think about are what would that end state look like? So go to the future and then work our way back. And so if you go to the next slide, I kind of want to deliberately paint a picture of how we might organize businesses in the future, and then start to pull it backwards to go, well, what implications might that have for organizations today, and what can we do about it? And so the top left of this diagram kind of indicates where we are today. It's a typical classical organizational structure, organizational design. And when people talk about org design, we tend to think of boxes and lines, right? That's roles, responsibilities, who's in the role, how many, what span of control do they have, what are their accountabilities? And so organizations today are made up of hundreds or thousands of staff, depending on how big you are. It could be a small organization, you could have 20 people in it, but you could also have organizations of over 100,000 people. But they're organized in these silos, which has come from the industrial age even. It goes back as far as the industrial age, let alone the digital age, where they got smaller teams, but they're still organized in these silos. Where we might end up in the future, and I'm going to deliberately paint a futuristic picture here, is where instead of hundreds and thousands of staff, you've got 5 to 20 staff in your organization. And in fact, they run thousands of AI agents. So these autonomous AI agents that can make decisions or produce flows of work. And so the diagram on the right-hand side is starting to depict that. And there might even be levels in there. So you might have a strategic level, which is populated largely by humans, but they can also employ AI as a tool to help them define their strategy, but they're there to orchestrate the organization to ensure that there are governance procedures in place, that there's a reason to exist and that they're achieving something in the world. And then you have the operations layer where you have these teams of agentic workflows, and the green little agents are these agents, each one of them doing has a particular goal to achieve. And the red little agents might be overseeing it, they might be critiquing it, making sure that the flow of work works. And then you have a human who could be in the loop or above the loop, who actually is there to ensure that all of the tasks and all of the goals are achieved. Now, it's interesting because in that world, the skill set that a human staff member might have comprises of two core things. And so the first thing is they might know how to work with AI. And by how to work with AI, I mean the ability to converse with AI, the ability to get the best from it, knowing what's good, what isn't good. They understand when to intervene and when to leave AI alone. They also have, in addition to that ability to work with AI, they have a second really deep skill. And they could be either a domain expertise like functional, like finance or HR, or it could be sector experience like retail or dentistry or medical or whatever. And so it's having those two core things, either the ability to work with AI and that domain expertise, which could be functional or sector. And so the skill set's quite different to where we are today for that part of the organization. And then you get to the bottom layer, which is the customer experience layer. And a customer might interact with an agent, an AI agent, or it might interact with a human agent. And so there are still things in that model that are particularly to do with human-to-human relationships. And it goes back to what Valerie was talking about earlier. There are certain things that the relationships from human to human are critical to protect and preserve in the flow of work. And so those are the three levels. The agents are not task-oriented. They're actually goal-seeking. And by that, they're actually able to use knowledge and experience of how things are done to figure out and achieve an end goal, not just follow a process. So it's not hard-coded. It's not like an A plus B equals C and you follow a process. It's actually quite different. It's actually goal-oriented where they make decisions. And each part of the chain has its own speciality on what it knows about. It can also access tools, so it can take actions. It can update spreadsheets. It can make phone calls with human voices. It can do all that sort of stuff, make appointments, surf the web. And so all of this gets pulled together in some kind of a network. And so if we think of if that is where we're going to end up, and we recently presented this to a group of people, courtesy of ACMP at the business show, and I asked the question, how many people in the audience thought that this could be the eventual result of where we are? And more than half of the audience put their hand up. And so I thought I'd actually have to convince people of this, but actually people are already in that space. We already realize where this might end up, which is quite interesting. It was quite an eye-opener for me. But if we move from that future to where we are today, what does this mean? Well, it means real flatter structures. Structures are going to be so flat, we'll have very few people in the organization potentially. And so that's not going to happen overnight. But what does that mean in terms of where we are today? Can we think about how we can start to reduce the structures in our organization? And what does that mean in terms of leadership and followership? And so that's one. We're going to move from silos to networked organization. And Valerie also mentioned networked organizations earlier. And so in that network, it's human to human, human to agentic, agentic to agentic. It's agentic to human. And so you get all of these relationships that are starting to happen. And then we might be in the loop. Currently, we talk about being in the loop. So when we're in there to make sure that every agentic decision that is made is accurate and is acceptable, well, I think there'll come a time when it will no longer hallucinate and we don't have to be in the loop, but we have to be above the loop so that when an agent can't resolve something, it can escalate it to a human to resolve. And that might be when we go above the loop. There are also some other things, like Brad mentioned the pit stop and how quickly everything was working in that pit stop and everybody had that role. Well, when you think that these agentic workflows work at millisecond speeds, then it's even more critical when you think about it at how fast all those things are going to move. So governance at the speed of light, if you like, is something that's going to have to happen, which means we as humans can't work at that speed, which is why there's the red agentic components, because they're actually trying to govern this process at the speed, which is even faster than the pit stop that Brad mentioned. And so, that's another shift that we going to have to think about, the speed at which we're going to be operating. And so that's going to be quite a different operational structure and organization. If we move to the next slide, we might then go, well, so what? How can we prepare for that? What are the things that we can do today that we can think about? And if you, like me, believe that there's a non-zero chance of that happening, doesn't matter whether it's a 70% chance or a 30% chance, then there's some things that we probably need to consider. So the first thing I'd advise organizations to do is put agentic AI on the top of team agenda. And so the top team in the organization needs to be thinking, if this is a future that we're going to end up in, what does that mean for our business? How quickly will it happen? What do we need to do about it now? And so just trying to get into the psyche of the executive and getting them to have regular discussions with it and having a clear strategic intent will allow you to build an ambition and bring your organization along with that ambition. From technology forward to future backwards. It's a bit like, I think Valerie said, from hierarchy to relationship. In the same vein, think about this as the technology that we might be using in the future. How does that create an organization? And what does that mean for us today? How do leaders think that way? How can leaders think in my business, my business unit, how will this look like in the future? And therefore, what do I need to prepare for that to happen? Re-engineering the work. So moving from job-specific to task-specific work packages. And as you're doing that, have a clear focus on what is inherently human about the task that you could currently create. What relationships can be agentic? What relationships need to remain human? Those things are really critical. And if we want to preserve that, we need to really consider how we break down our tasks into much smaller packages that can be gradually agentic, gradually AI'd, if you like. And so that we are moving along an evolutionary path rather than a revolutionary path. This one is probably the most important. Foster trust and transparency. And I think Valerie mentioned trust a lot in the piece that she put forward. And so I would definitely be considering trust and transparency, but how do you create that trust of the system? How do you get past the idea that AI is going to take my job? What does that mean in an evolutionary roadmap as opposed to a revolutionary roadmap? And then the final one, whilst the last one was most important, the final one is the one that you can get started with right away, which is to launch a comprehensive upskilling. data and AI literacy across the organization, understanding what does AI, how does AI work? How is it fallible? What does good look like? You can't learn this by watching YouTube videos. You have to learn this by getting your hands dirty. And so learning by doing is what I'd really recommend here. Prompt engineering will be that skill that helps you talk to AI. And so I would encourage organizations to think about AI literacy programs that include prompt engineering that give people hands-on experience of working with AI as they proceed. And that's something that you can actually do you can do straight away, you can do tomorrow, because there are lots of platforms which are so accessible and you can actually jump in and do that. So those are some of the things you can do. And I've tried to relate it back to some of the things that we talked about before. And Enrique spoke about processes and procedures. And that whole thing about re-engineering work is exactly what I think I would relate to Enrique's components of the diamond. And how do you pull that together when you're re-engineering the work? Think about all those other aspects that need to change. It's not done in isolation. And so that's kind of where I'll leave it. But hopefully I've drawn in some of the things that the other speakers have also said along the way.
Fantastic. That's just so, there's so much for us to cater for here.
There's a lot to unpack.
Thanks, Max. And you've managed to get onto 2 slides, man. I could not do that on 2 slides, that's for sure. So well done to you, and to you, Val and Enrique as well. Thank you all very, very much. And what I think we'll do now is just step in now. We've got a bit of a foundation for a bit more of a chat. I know Radan has a couple of questions that he wants to ask of the panelists here today. So I'm going to hand over to Radan. We've got probably another 15 minutes or so. We'll see how we go for time, but let's see if we can dig a little deeper on some of these issues. So Radan, if you'd like to pop your first question, I might just close the screen share.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Valerie, Max, Enrique. It was really thought-provoking, and I was just reflecting on my recent job. I was involved in target people and culture operating model design for large Australia-wide construction and engineering company with very diverse, almost 20 different lines of businesses. So, all of those things you have spoken about, process discovery, mapping, re-engineering, standardizing, and so on. We have used similar model, your diamond, with few kind of modifications, specifically because offshoring was the final step in the journey, where the initially create shared service function was then offshore to Philippines. And that's where I wanted to throw a question to you, Enrique, based on your experience. What would be your guidance about this third degree thinking, the recursive checks about when you are then offshoring those standardized processes into non-Australian location? What are the things to be mindful of? Because we were struggling with unexpected things, like Philippines have twice as many public holidays in comparing with Australia. So what do you do with those situations? Philippines have very high prevalence of typhoons, floods, and similar events, which were just completely destroying internet connectivity, and therefore the offshore location was unavailable to support Australia. So these were things which, even though we focused on location as additional part of your diamond model, we absolutely did not envision all of those complications. So I am just curious about what kind of guidance would you provide in that?
No, it's a terrific question. Yeah, the recursion check is very, very important, especially when there is a fundamental change. I think you'd probably say in your situation, a cultural change. And you kind of see that a lot when you're going to a new culture, whether it be offshoring or maybe more relatable when you're doing a merger and acquisition integration. So, everyone's been involved where you change a process, pick a new process, pick a new tool, adopt an ERP. Everyone gets rounded around that. And that kind of works when you are working within an organization, within an organizational context, an organizational culture. But if you have acquired a new organization, if you're offshoring to a new country, or if you're being acquired yourself by a new organization, or integrating numerous other acquisitions as part of your change model, that's where recursion checks become very important. because the simple process change requires belts and braces. Has everyone heard the term belts and braces? Make sure your pants don't fall down, right? You got to wear braces and a belt. So yeah, look, that's a perfect example, Radan. Like when it's not just, when a process change isn't just a process change. When there's a geography change, when there's a cultural change, when there is an organizational sociology change, when you're not just replacing a screwdriver with an electric screwdriver. You actually have to build an entire new tool to make the change happen, which requires a new way of working, a new way of being, and maybe even a new identity for individuals in the organization. That is exactly the time when you want to take your change and place that in the middle and build your diamond around that as a recursion check.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Max,
Definitely.
I was just going to add something. So did you want to respond to that first, though, Radan?
Well, I actually structured my questions around offshoring as a kind of additional factor addressing each of your individual checks. So in my second one, I wanted to reach to Valerie and ask about trust, about, as Enrique just now said, about cross-cultural management. You know, how do you build trust across borders, especially when we have people like offshoring to India or Philippines, or even myself with a funny Central European accent, people by default think that I am less intelligent because of that, right? So there are a lot of things which must be addressed. So what would be your tips for how to address this kind of cross-cultural management, mergers, acquisition, another perfect example of that? And then, Max, I have one question relating to your point, which is also around offshoring. So hold on.
over to you, Val.
All right. So I think in terms of trust, do we think, first of all, in terms of human to human, it takes a long time to build trust with somebody, but one small little glint can actually totally destroy it. Now, the difference perhaps now when we're working with AI is that we've actually already been working through a phase where, and right now, where people are saying we can't trust it. It's been making things up. I was actually talking to a state government last week, and they were saying, oh, well, we can't trust the AI. Well, it's continually being developed. And as it's being developed, we are trusting it more. So that is humans and that is AI. Now, when it comes to how we work together as a team in terms of trust, it's changing faster than ever. If you think in terms of you'll put something in, it doesn't matter whether it's Claude, whether it's Copilot, whether it's ChatGPT, whatever it might be, is that what we're coming with is a question, but what we need to learn, and there are organizations already doing this, they are teaching individuals how to ask the questions to get the best information that they can then cross-check it, just like you would with a human, to make sure they're actually okay and you're on the right track. But it's happening fast. So I can tell you there's a call center right now where humans are being let's say, helped to develop these kind of questions, to build the trust, to make sure they know what to ask. It's forming a relationship with the AI. Now, we've heard lots of negativity as well in terms of, oh, well, it's actually set up to, there was one instance where it's set up to actually give somebody information to help them commit suicide. Well, let's think of how AI is set up. It is set up to make sure that whoever is the client, the customer, the user, they're giving you the information that you want. So that is what was happening. Now, that is why we are tightening. The AI is being tightened, and we together are learning how to then ask the questions of AI to build the trust, to then check it, to ask it to refine it, and then, if necessary, even check from one intelligence to another. So I would say as we go forward, we've actually already come from the worst and we're building trust. And as we go at the moment, it's very much about talking about high tech. But as we move forward with things like trust, it's going to be very much high touch. So I hope that answers your question.
Fantastic, Val.
Thank you. So now, Max, over to you. And my question is kind of based on the fact that we have met some many moons ago in IBM, and IBM has moved into offshoring, kind of emulating success of the Indian outsourcers like HCL and Infosys and Wipro and so on. When I was looking at your slide talking about change of organizations where you have significantly fewer employees working with thousands of agents, that would sort of imply that offshoring model as such is under existential threat from AI because it will be done potentially much cheaper. Yes, there is a price differential between India or Philippines versus Australia, but with AI, it might be potentially even cheaper. Of course, there will be some additional complications, but I was just wondering how would you respond to this kind of question?
Yes, and that's exactly where my head went when you were talking to Enrique, and so it's yeah. Thanks for kind of redirecting that. So offshoring is like with all organizations, offshoring is a two-part. There's two drivers for it. One is cost efficiency, of course, and then in an ideal world, it's also about customer service. It's actually to provide better customer service. You might actually be able to provide, customer service over longer hours, for example. And so, in theory, at least, it was. But the challenges come in. I mean, you mentioned a few typhoons, accents, cultural challenges, those things that, broadband, uptime, all of those things kind of get in the way. And humans are humans. Whereas with the sort of picture I presented with the future, it would potentially put offshoring under, using your words, existential threat, because it would be easier to have them onshore. And there's this idea that if you think about the evolutionary process that we go through, we might be actually looking at all of those things. The middle layer that I showed, that ops, could actually be just certain parts of certain tasks and certain operations in an organization that you would typically offshore, which you could instead create a subsection of your organization that's run with AI agents. The remainder could still be all humans. It's just that this part of it could be, and so that could be part of the evolutionary process we go towards this future. And really, it's improving. That the processes are improving. I think there's three things that we have to account for as to whether that would actually work. One is the accuracy, and Valerie's already mentioned that, and the shift that's happening on there. But it's 80% accurate RAW is what is easy to achieve. Anything above that is actually really difficult, and so we can't rely on it. But humans make mistakes too, so we can't rely on humans as at 110% of the time either. And so there's a challenge there. But accuracy will increase. Connectedness, where the ability to interoperate with other systems. At the moment, you can get agents to talk to agents, but getting agents to talk to ERP systems and collect data and all the rest of it is quite a challenge. But they are building new protocols for that right as we speak, and that's happening more and more. And also, all of those vendors are putting agentic workflows into those systems, and so they will be able to interact with other agents, and so that the interconnection between agents will work. And then the third thing is the cost of inference. It's likely to go up before it comes down. With more agents, every one of them is doing an inference, which means the cost of inference will go up, but the cost of the technology that drives that inference is coming down. And so there will be a meeting of minds. And when those three things hit together, I think that's the tipping point that will release organizations to do what we've just talked about, which is, instead of offshoring to another country, get the same benefits, cheaper, better, and have any accent you want, any language you want, answering the phone, as opposed to just, so it can, I think it's on the cards to answer your question for sure.
Yeah, and I think that you have described exactly one of the underlying principles was that the strategic and work where people and culture professionals needed to interact with people that stayed onshore. But the high volume, low complexity administrative tasks were offshore, which is perfect space for those AI agents, especially when, as in this case, they had multiple systems, one for talent acquisition, one for blue collars, another one for white collars, finance, and so on. So that's where the AI agents, in my view, will really, at the end, make this whole spaghetti diagram environment much simpler and hopefully more efficient. But yeah, thank you.
And just to add to that, we're actually already moving into that space. Like I was reading about the ground has kind of really shifted because Shopify, I don't know if you've heard about this, in April 2025 this year, announced that there will be no new hires will be approved unless AI demonstrably cannot do the job. So if AI can do the job, we're not going to hire. And so that's coming from the other end, which is the whole job you can't hire a human to do the job because AI will do it. Whereas what we're talking about is more evolutionary. I'm hoping it'll be more evolutionary than revolutionary, because there's really important relationships and humanistic components of how we interact with our customers that need to be retained. And so we need to move in a direction that allows us to do that. But yeah, I think we're already on the way. It's the short answer to that long little intro again.
Hey, thank you, Max, and thank you, Radan. Look, we've got another few minutes, and I'd like to sort of pose a question to our panelists. This is one that I've been contemplating for a while, listening to all sorts of thought leaders and practitioners, innovators, scientists, etc., in this field. And our topic today was about innovative approaches to organisational design. Fine. We're talking about, we got to the point we moved beyond generative AI. We're now talking about agentic AI. We haven't quite got to super intelligence or whatever level might be beyond that. But let me ask you this question. In the context of org design and all that we've just shared, I'm interested to hear from all of you, even just a few minutes of thinking. What about the ethical boundaries, constraints, limitations? So I noticed, I'll start with you, Max, because I noticed in your last slide, we made a quick reference to large language models as a foundation for generative AI. And, a lot of really quite lucid, long-standing practitioners and innovators in the field, people like Jan LeCun and Fei-Fei Li, and then you start talking about some philosophers and some historians, the guys like Yuval Harari, and so on and so forth. They've got some really interesting thoughts about world models and about the sort of independence of this next level beyond agentic AI, where there's an independent kind of thinking and learning going on, where they will be able to do things that maybe we can't do at all, and we have no, quote, boundaries around that choice that agent might be making. What concerns do you have about the rapid pace of these developments and where it might take society at large? Never mind organisations.
Wow, that's a massive question. We could have a whole hour on that one.
2 minutes. We've got 2 minutes each of you.
2 minutes. All right. So it's the buzz that's been out there for a little while now, which is this going to lead to the extinction of humans, or is it going to lead to an abundance and a world of plentiness, and we don't have to work anymore? And
Star
if you
Trek.
get to that final sort of destination, which one of those it's going to be? Like, so I'll answer it this way. I'd say I have a lot of faith in the technology that the technology could achieve. Unfortunately, could achieve both of those scenarios.
That's right.
So the technology could definitely achieve both of those scenarios. I would like to think that humans would realize that in order to move to the abundant state, there has to be a fundamental shift in the way politics and humans think, in politicians and everybody else thinks, in that we've got to move away from the rich getting richer and the rest of us just trying to find our way forward, and into, I don't want to get too political here, but what's going to get in the way of all of this is keeping the status quo, that we've got to have hierarchies in society, and that some people will be better off than others. If we can shift that mindset, then I think there's more chance that the technology will be able to lead us to a place of abundance than lead us to a place of woe. And so that is the challenge. The key going to unlock this is what I'd say. But
So
yeah,
we may well be the cause of our own demise.
absolutely.
Thank you, Max.
Not
What
to,
about you,
not
Val?
to paint too bad a picture, but how much faith do we have in human nature? Let's put it that
There
way.
you go, man. Over to you, Val. Last couple of words.
I certainly think that anything that's routine and analytical from a job perspective is actually going to shrink. But I also think that anything that is relational, anything that is creative, anything that is agile is going to expand. Now, they have said that by 2035, that they reckon that millions would have transitioned their roles. That is the date, and that's what they're putting out there. And you can see it already. I mean, from the time of the exhibition to now, things have changed. It's only 2 weeks ago.
That's
So
right.
in terms of that, I think we're going to see, and it's being talked about a lot in terms of responsible design, in terms of ethics, in terms of governance. It is something that I think we can learn from in terms of the disasters of the internet, quite frankly, that are not enough structures were put into place then that we can put into place now. I won't get involved in the politics of this because I think that in terms of there's many different ways that we could look at this. And it really depends at the end of the day who's actually putting out the programming and the code. All we can do is make sure that when we're actually using it, that is aligned to our values, our beliefs, and that we're making sure that in terms of we're making leaders the stewards, really. And stewards, both responsible AI, but also going back to my focus is that relational climate.
Beautiful. Well said. Enrique, last minute or two for a final word from you, my friend.
Oh, well, what can I add to that? Look, what can I add to that? Other than call to a close, bring it back to organizational design and outcomes, which, as you know, I'm passionate about.
Yep. Yes, very much so.
Same old, guys. Look, we're all old enough to recall that back in the mid-1990s, if you built a website, the world would beat a path to your door. I also remember in the early 2000s, if you built an ERP, the world would beat a path to your door. I remember the late 2000s, if you built a CRM, the world would beat a path to your door. Nothing could have been further from the truth then. Nothing's further from the truth now. If you build an AI, the world will beat a path to your door. The answer is not. Organizational design, what's your outcome? What's the business case? Clearly plan it out. It's not a magic, it's not a magic bullet. It's not a magic mushroom. It's not a magic anything. There is hype, and that hype is people just wanting to use the term AI to bolster their share prices and show their shareholders that they're doing something. We're going to see a reality hit in the next couple of years where people will apply this with proper thinking, proper old-fashioned analysis and diagnosis. And it's only then and only then that we'll be able to start shaping up what we'll be seeing in the future. I don't think we can predict that now.
Well, my friends, I want to thank you all very, very much for sharing your insights, your wisdom and experience, and your ideas for our listeners to consider as they start thinking about innovative ways to organise their business, their enterprise, their team for a very interesting, complex, and dare I say, fast-paced future. So thank you very much, one and all, and we'll have this video available for watching very, very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Everybody.
much.
You
Thanks.
have a good
Okay.
day, everyone.
Thank you.
Panel.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.